Hey everyone, let's go ahead and start talking about our biological psychology chapter. This is going to be talking about how our nervous system and endocrine system actually impact how we think, how we feel, how we behave. So we're going to jump in quickly and talk about Derek Amato. I'm going to provide a link for you under the chapter 3 information. I'd really like for you to watch this video. There'll be a couple of questions on our unit exam about him. And so really consider, do we have all the talent in the world already in our brain, but it's just not unleashed yet? So be sure to watch that. I'll also provide a link for Jason Paget. Another person who did not have an ability, had head trauma, and suddenly becomes a mathematical wizard. So I'll provide that as well. So as you're looking at these two, they did not have an ability, some head trauma occurred, and now suddenly they're geniuses in that one specific area. So when we're looking at the brain, it's so misunderstood, or we still have a lot more to go in understanding. So what we're going to be talking about here is what we do understand, but remember, there's so much still out there that we don't know. All right, so when we're looking at our nervous system, we're talking about a system whose primary purpose is communication. It is going to communicate from the external world into our brain, via our senses, what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we taste, what we smell. And so from the external in, and also from our internal, our responses going out. So think of it as a two-way street. There's things coming in, we interpret it, and then things going out. Now those things are going to be called neurotransmitters, and neurotransmitters are simply chemical messages. So in other words, as each one of these messages hits their intended spot, they're going to interpret a message. So for instance, if you're anxious about something, that started somewhere. Maybe you saw that there was a test due that you did not know was due. And so that test due date arrives and you're kind of freaking out. Well, that freak out comes from your neurotransmitters sending it to the whole rest of your body, making your respiration change, making your heartbeat increase, maybe making you sweat, making it hard to sleep. And so these messages are going throughout our body. Now, how they get throughout our body are through these nerve cells or neurons. So think about a train track where you've got this train track that can veer off over here, veer off over there, depending upon the need. And so they're kind of the track that these messages are going to travel on. All right, so when we're looking at the traveling of the neuron or the neurotransmitters, it's really, really important that we have several that travel up to 200 miles per hour. I guarantee you, if you see a car coming at you, you're going to want to have quick response to that. So seeing the car heading right toward you and then you leaping to the side to prevent danger to yourself, that's going to need a quick response, but then some other travel about 2 miles per hour. So it's not the mandatory stuff. So it's this difference in speed. All right, so when we're looking at neurons, you're born with approximately 100 billion, and that's way more than you're ever going to need. Now, because neurons need, or your brain actually needs experience, neurons, even though you've got all of them, 100 billion of them, there's not connection between them. And so newborns need to use reflexes. So they instantly know to cry when they're uncomfortable, when something happens, when they're hungry, they know as soon as you put the nipple in their mouth, they begin to suck. So they have these reflexes because they've never had experience or have had very limited experience. So when we're looking at the neurons, it's not that they have too few, it's just that they haven't thickened, they haven't moved toward one another. So if we look at before they're born, that 36 weeks gestation, we see something that's very thin. We don't see much accumulation because they're very far apart. Newborn, a little bit closer. 3 months, much closer, many more connections. Not that there's more neurons, but there's more connections. At 6 months, look at that explosion. And then at 2 years, because we've had so much interaction with our world, we're beginning to actually make connections where we can think for ourselves. You know, that 3-month and 6-month really couldn't do that because there wasn't enough connection between the neurons. At 4 years, if you look at that, it looks like there's less. And the reason there is because your brain, you've heard that use it or lose it. That happens here. So we have this thing called synaptic pruning, where if it's something that's super not important, then we're going to go ahead and cut it so that all the energy is used to actually use the routes that are used. So it gives more energy to the routes that are commonly used. And then at 6 years, you see a little bit more pruning. And so it's really important that we allow stimulation for our children. We allow interaction and communication and, you know, different scenarios and situations so they can actually have this neuronal growth and begin that bringing the two neurons together. All right, so we look over here and there's this real cute little animation of what a neuron looks like. And we're going to go over some of this a little bit deeper in a minute. But what I want to do is look at comparing two types of neurons. So first of all, our sensory neurons, their purpose is very unique, okay? Our purpose of the sensory neuron is to get environmental information. So everything that we are sensing outside to come in. So the sensing outside into our brain or into our spinal cord. So when we hear something, someone's voice that we are familiar with, it goes into our brain, it gets processed, and then we have an outgoing. But for sensory, it's going to be just incoming. We also call these afferent neurons. So these neurons are actually going to be incoming versus our motor neurons. And its purpose is after the brain has actually processed, and we're like, oh, that's such and so's voice, and we want to turn toward them. Maybe it's your loved one, you know, that romantic partner. And so what it's going to do is start to release these feel-good chemicals and these loving, warm chemicals into your body, and you're going to turn to them. So the response is the motor neuron. So incoming, hear the voice of your lover, and then respond, turn toward them, have the warm, gushy feelings. That's going to be your motor neuron. So the difference is between in and out. Now, these are called efferent neurons. So make sure that you're familiar with both terms, afferent and efferent. Now, I use dorky hints to help me remember things. Like I think I've told you guys several times, I actually have a slight learning disability, so I had to play around with things to make them make more sense to me. So if you think about it, A comes before E. You have to see it or smell it or taste it or feel it or hear it before you respond. So first you see it, then you respond to it. So A comes before E. But another student told me there's another way of looking at this, and that is exit. E for exit, exiting your brain. Efferent, exit. All right. So we've got incoming, we have outgoing. So now what I want you to do is we're going to pick between, are there sensory neurons working here or are there motor neurons working here for the next phrase that I'm going to tell you. So think carefully before you answer. If I am reaching for the coffee cup, is that afferent or is that efferent? Make your decision. Okay. And the next one, when I smell the coffee brewing, what is now stimulated? So we kind of did this backwards. Reaching for the cup is going to be, I've actually seen it, so now I'm going to reach for it. So that's a response. Reaching for it is a response. So that's going to be our efferent or motor neurons. Smelling the coffee is actually going to be the neurons that are sensory. I'm smelling this. Okay, good deal. All right, so that's going to be it for this snip. So go ahead and pay attention to the next one, and we'll see you back in a minute.